Let's take a look at your market news now. Asian markets mostly rose on Monday on growing optimism for a trade deal between China and the United States after reports said the two sides were close to a breakthrough. Now, with a busy week of data releases and events coming up, investors got off to a positive start as they cheered stories saying the tariff standoff between the world's top two economies that has dragged on global growth could soon be resolved. It's the start of a new week, and it's a good start for Asian trading as Tokyo's Nikkei moved 1% to the good, closing out at 21,822 points, while the Hang Seng was 0.5% higher at 28,959. And the Shanghai Composite picked up 1.1% to close at 3,027. The S&P 500 and Dow snapped a three-day losing streak on Friday as optimism about the prospects for US-China trade agreement overshadowed downbeat US and Chinese manufacturing data. The Dow Jones Industrial Average picked up 0.4% to hit 26,027 points, while the S&P 500 was 0.2% higher at 2,803 points. The Nasdaq Composite also added 0.83% to hit 7,595 at the close. Let's take a closer look at how the markets are performing. Over to you, Arabile Gumede at the JSE.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nzinga. Well, it's a positive turnout to the market as well, and we're hoping that it continues, right, flowing through just particularly from last week where the US, as you said, broke that losing streak there. Asia this morning also positive, around 0.4% to the good on the local front, and so too, things are looking good out in Europe as well. The FTSE 100 around 0.5% to the good, the DAX marginally higher, the CAC 40 as well, around 0.5% better as well. So we'll unpack all of that, and of course the earnings news to have come out is still earnings season here locally, so we'll get into a bit of that in a moment or two. But for now, let's unpack the numbers and see how things are fared. So if you take a look at that market picture, of course, you will notice a whole sense of green there as well coming to the fore. So certainly enjoying that. But the Rand weakening further beyond that 14 Rand mark. Let's chat to Gary Boyson, who is portfolio manager at Rand Swiss. Gary, thank you so much for the time. Very quickly, let's touch on that Rand picture. Having seen some positive numbers out of the United States with that GDP figure of around 2.6%, the Rand has continued to sort of hold its negativity and now still around 14.24, still weaker than we had it a while ago. And that's probably the reason for that petrol price increase too.
I think, yeah, certainly the weaker Rand will feed into local petrol prices. But if you have a look at it, you know, we were a little bit more optimistic as we came into the week. You know, the dollar is just so strong. And while we did see the Rand appreciate a little bit, try and head back down towards that 14 Rand level as the trading day got underway, saw it start to weaken. I think it's really a story of dollar strength at the moment. We've got, you know, the potential, you know, conclusion of a US-China trade deal. That's, I think, you know, helping to fuel optimism. It's making the dollar a little bit stronger, I think, as well.
If they sort that out, if they do get that China-US trade deal sorted, we weaken even further.
It's interesting because, you know, traditionally when you get positive geopolitical events, you actually get a move back into emerging markets. You get kind of that risk-on, risk-off trade playing out. But just the fact that the US is such a big component of this trade deal, it's something centered directly around the US. You're seeing it trade a little bit, I suppose, more abnormally than others. I would say we'd see the Rand appreciate against the likes of sterling, euro, and other major, potentially Aussie dollar as well. But against that dollar is just so strong at the moment, as long as the Fed stays fairly hawkish.
What is your take on Edcon? I mean, the company continues to struggle with a whole lot of debtors, and their issues there are certainly something that the CEO will continue to look at and say, maybe I should have stayed in the mining industry. I don't know which one's worse for him.
Yeah, so looking at Grant Patterson, you know, obviously we had those headlines breaking around Edcon approaching the market to you know, restructure its debt, and you know the potential for large layoffs. And I mean that was a media story that broke about a month ago, and immediately you know Grant Patterson jumped on Twitter and said, we're in the process of a refinancing deal. This is kind of irresponsible journalism. We are going to sort things out. So since then we've seen, you know, the refinancing is really taking hold. They've come to an agreement with the banks. They've come to an agreement with some of their landlords as well on 41% of their property portfolio. just to refinance and put Edcon on at least give them a fighting chance to come through this. We know that Edcon is facing a huge amount of pressure from international competitors, the likes of H&M, Zara, and they're having to rethink their business model. But some comments from today, just from the CEO, was now that they've got that refinancing package behind them, they can now start to focus on the restructure of the business. So interestingly said, they've already started to right-size the business in that they've closed smaller stores, but this is not necessarily going to result in major job losses across the group, because they're really going to be transferring employees from the smaller stores to larger stores where they are actually short of staff. So it seems like I think Edcon's got a long path to work. I think they've got to be very, very innovative in the current environment. But hopefully the refinancing is the beginning of a turnaround.
We can only hope, really. RCL also coming out with numbers on that front as well. I mean, the listeriosis saga continues and goes on for perhaps a dragging on effect, if you want to call it that. Do you think they performed better than expected here?
I think they did perform a little bit better than expected, because you've seen the share price up on the day. Now, if you have a look at it, it's interesting. The listeriosis, they kind of got swept up in the crisis, although their actual polony was not affected. Yeah. So it is encouraging to see that brand has now almost recovered. I think it's almost back to the same levels of sales that it was pre-outbreak. So that's certainly positive for the company. What I think is really, the company is struggling with at the moment is one, we've had a very late planting season at the moment. So one of the big input costs to a business like RCL is essentially their feed costs. So with maize prices increasing, and I suppose set to increase further based on what the planting season happened a little bit late. It doesn't make it easy for the business. So we did see earnings under a little bit of pressure, and I think that might continue. At the same time, we've also got further accusations around Brazilian chicken dumping. A lot of very, very low cost chicken arriving on our shores. Some questions around I suppose the safety of the product as well, and government's lack of intervention. But again, you look at it, it does make it quite difficult, because obviously Brazil is part of the BRICS. The BRICS nation, so it's a very politically contentious partner to increase tariffs against.
Yeah, very difficult one to ascertain. Look, let's talk about Bidvest as well, having come out with that sort of earnings. That conglomerate just is one that perhaps you want to look at and say is sort of primed to be making some positive headways. But are they really in a positive space right now? Is Bidvest a company to be looking at and say, yeah, I can continue to invest in that?
You look at the management of Bidvest, and it's exceptional. So Bidvest is operating, now that they've split up Bidcorp, it's very much a South African business. It's a South African Inc. business. And, we're looking at a very tough consumer environment. We didn't see the overall revenue line moving up that much. I think revenue was up 0.2%. Yeah. But what you are seeing is that they've increased their dividend by 10%. They're managing to push through around 10% earnings growth. So they're seeing kind of pockets of opportunity in the South African environment and managing to exploit them. They're saying, yes, it is a very, very tough business environment in South Africa at the moment, but there is real opportunity. And when you read the management statement around Bidvest at the moment, it comes across as a tone of cautious optimism that things are starting to look a little bit better. And I think this is a company, if we do get things right in South Africa and things do start to turn, this is one that will do exceptionally well.
As I noted, perhaps at the forefront, if things do turn around, certainly. Look, we do have GDP numbers out tomorrow, but one of the things that we are looking out for in future is that Steinhoff report. Things continue to be eagerly anticipated, awaited heavily. Your thoughts, your expectations, is it going to be just a whole lot of bad news and that's all we're going to get from it?
The problem is we still don't know. We're getting little bits and pieces coming out of it, and I think what we were talking about, the real unfortunate thing is just the time it's taken to go through this, because the longer it takes, the more difficult it is for the actual operating businesses that still remain within Steinhoff to function effectively. I mean, when you've got almost everything put on hold and your competitors are opening new stores and you want to open new stores, but there's this kind of cloud hanging over it and you can't get things approved, must be very, very difficult. But it was interesting to note, I was at the JSE results on Friday, and there's been a lot of criticism that in this period period of uncertainty, that the JSE hasn't actually suspended the trading of the shares. There's just something interesting that the CEO, Nikki Newton-King, said on Friday, was that when you suspend a share, you're not sending the company to the headmaster's office. What you're doing is you're actually removing the rights of investors to sell their shares. Yeah. And I just thought that was an interesting way of putting it, that this is a company with a lot of uncertainty around it, but it is still active. You still have the ability to buy it, and it is still at this stage a going concern.
Yeah, and you still have the ability to sell it too.
That's it.
Which is probably what has happened a lot. Gary, appreciate your time there. Gary Boyson, portfolio manager at Rand Swiss there. As we said, that Rand also continuously weakening. But tomorrow is those GDP numbers. 11:30 is when the number is expected to come out. How did South Africa do in the fourth quarter? And most importantly, how did South Africa do for the whole year? It is expected that we got less than 1% growth again. That will be another year in which growth has weakened consistently. Of course, 2017 saw growth of 0.6% after a revision, of course. But will we get 1% at least in 2019? We can only tell in future, but On Point will certainly be there to give you the latest on that one. From me, that's where the buck stops.